move forward without waiting to our panel 3. We'll take a few questions after our 3 panels altogether. So let's move to panel 3. Panel 3 is a topic. Geneva knows a lot about multi-stakeholders mechanism. And so our 3 last panelists are, and please join me on stage, Mr. Kari Tapiola. Mr. Tapiola is a former Deputy Director General of the International Labour Organization, plus also the author of a book entitled The Driving Force, Birth and Evolution of Tripartism. Thank you for being with us today, Mr. Tapiola. We have also with us today Mr. José Luis Fernandez, who is an AI expert, also a PhD at the Spanish Artificial Intelligence Research Institute, also a senior lecturer at the Centre Universitaire d'Informatique of University of Geneva, and finally head of the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals Accelerator. And our panel 3 young discussant is Mrs. Natasha Pambou, and we'll have a special intervention of Mrs. Luis Rodrigo Morales, but maybe you'll join on my, maybe you can join us just after, Mr. Morales, maybe you'll join us just after, and I give you my place for the logic of the intervention is better. So our 3 panelists, so Kari Tapiola, José Luis Fernandez, and our young discussant, Mrs. Natasha Pambou. Mrs. Pambou is the president of Geneva International Model United Nations. And as we'll have a special intervention just after our 3 panelists. So exchanges and inclusion of non-state players has been a feature of the Geneva multilateral diplomacy since the League of Nations. The most elaborated, institutionalized and efficient form of multi-stakeholderism is of course the International Labour Organization. But interaction with private sector, NGOs, and the academia is very fluid in the Geneva ecosystem in all topics of its agenda. So, Mr. Kari Tapiola, as the former Deputy Director General of the International Labour Organization, what about ILO tripartism, which is one of your specialty? So you have the floor, and the microphone is open. You can just grab it, and you have the floor.
Okay, this seems to work, I suppose. Well, I mean, if we talk about multi-stakeholder participation, so very often the ILO is seen as some kind of an example. On the other hand, the ILO is an exception. And I'd say it's a bit of a historical exception because it was founded in 1919. And it was quite clear that in the earlier discussions already on labor throughout, you had to have a participation of trade unions or organized labor. But I'd also like to note that at the time, the dividing line between, say, trade unions and labor parties did not really clearly exist. So, in a way, the fact that the ILO took a parliamentarian system and full participation of what we today call social partners, it's also due to the time and due to the agenda. One of the issues on which we could talk at length is that the employers' side or the private sector side has never been organized in the same way as unions, as the workers have, but that is also due to the different nature. Workers don't compete with one another by definition. The private sector competes. So you have a different starting point. But, I think we should recall that most of the organizations, actually all of the UN family, have active relations with the civil society and with NGOs and with the private sector. There are multiple ways in which the International Telecommunications Union interacts, or the International Maritime Organization, or the Food and Agriculture Organization, and others. I think we could very clearly make the argument that without civil society participation in different ways, so this multilateral system would not work. It simply would not work. And the more we look at ways in which to work on the ground through technical cooperation and through partnerships and so on, the more we need the civil society, different elements of the civil society. ILO is an exception because in the ILO, employers and workers are part of the decision-making process. But they are part of the decision-making process in labor issues in every country anyway. Labor regulations can be implemented by either law or by agreements between employers and workers. And the more and more diversified the economy becomes, the more and more will be done through private agreements. And all these need benchmarks, so the ILO helps in creating those benchmarks. But on the other hand, the ILO itself has the same large amount of interaction with NGOs and civil society organizations as all the others. So it's really, I'd say, the more we work on the ground, the more we need the civil society and its different actors.
And what are your views on the role of International Geneva in reaching agreements?
Excuse me?
What are your views on the role of International Geneva in reaching those kind of agreements?
International Geneva has actually inherited much of the multilateral activity that started with the League of Nations. And I think we should really understand that although politically the League of Nations may have been a failure or was doomed in the historical situation, all the specialized agencies, their activities have their roots in what the League of Nations started developing. Geneva has always been a good ground for that. It's peaceful compared with many other places. It's pleasant to live. For proper technical work, which calls for some time and patience, Geneva is much better than New York. New York, as far as I can see, they can keep their Security Council. Problem with the Security Council is that it was negotiated by allies with the whose thinking at the time was that we are the good guys and we need to make this world work. Unfortunately, now all the bad guys are on the Security Council, but as far as I'm concerned, New York can have its role and Geneva is much, much more productive.
And what are your views on the draft pact of the future that is being negotiated as a result of the summit?
Well, I'm not very impressed, if I'd really say it honestly, because I'm missing a leading thought. I'm missing something on which one could really start working. Not a soundbite, but something concrete. I'll give you one example. In the social summit, UN social summit in Copenhagen, 1995, there were 2 lines in a 100-page document on international labor standards and what should be done with international labor standards at a time when there was a real debate on trade and labor standards and globalization. Not more than 2 lines. In the ILO, we built on those 2 lines a whole declaration and a whole program of technical cooperation. I'm looking for those two sentences and also missing one thing: priorities. I remember that about 25 years ago, when Juan Somerville was a candidate for Director General of the ILO, he criticized the ILO's program, budget and program, which had at the time 39 major programs and priorities. And he said that, well, an organization that has 39 priorities has no priorities. So he started working. He came with the notion of decent work, where he had 4 strategic priorities: employment, rights, social protection, social dialogue. By the time he left, I suppose that the ILO actually had more than 39 priorities, but that's the normal development. I was looking yesterday at the report, good report, thorough report, that Mrs. Colonna, the former French Prime Minister, has made with recommendations on UNRWA, the refugee agency for Palestinians. You have 50 recommendations. Now, if I would be the head of UNRWA, I would scratch my head and say, well, where do I start from? We tend to, in these documents, which we are very good at producing, we tend to overload them with recommendation after recommendation after recommendation. There's something that we may have inherited from the old Soviet Union, because there often was a question: why are the speeches of Brezhnev so long? The answer was, if something is left out, that will immediately be seen as a political signal. Now, when we live in this kind of mode that we have to say everything about everything, we end up by saying nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Tapiola. I will now give the floor and this desk to special intervention of Mr. Luis Morales. Mr. Morales is the Director of Policy, Industrial Relations and ILO Coordination at the International Organization of Employers. So please, Mr. Morales, you have the floor and this microphone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to join you here and of course listen to the views of Mr. Tapiola as a former director of the ILO, where we are as employers, one of the arms of this organization. I come from the International Organization of Employers. For those who don't know this organization, it represents the voice of business. So we gather about 150 business federations that conform a network of over 50 million business. And we are organized, we are very well organized, and we bring one voice. So there's cohesion, Mr. Tapiola, to the voice and the messages that we bring to the multilateral system. And certainly this is clearly evidenced at the ILO, where we come and represent employers. But it is not that clear as it comes to the rest of the multilateral system. And this is one of the biggest issues we see and biggest mistakes we see when we try to advance the SDGs, to advance social justice across the UN system. We have to bear in mind that the role of the private sector is extremely relevant, but we are often seen just as donors, as the ones that put money in, rather than being seen as actors, as relevant actors that bring and deliver action. Just take a look at employment. The private sector generates 9 out of 10 works around the world. So what are we going to do with SDGs? Certainly SDG 8 is clear, decent work. Okay, we have to talk to the private sector if we want to talk about decent work. But what about eradication of poverty? How are we going to achieve that without partnering with the private sector? So there's a need for a stronger involvement with the private sector, not only at the level with the ILO, but across the UN system. This is one of the main aspects of multilateralism that brings importance to us, right? So to see how we can contribute and how we can collaborate, and more than sponsors, real actors delivering actions. There's, of course, policies of unemployment and social issues that are negotiated at the level of the ILO via social dialogue, as Mr. Tapiola mentioned, but advancing social justice goes well beyond. And that means taking action at national level and engagement. And this is why we are pushing and fostering this strengthened relationship across the UN system, and talking and partnering also with regional coordinators who are actually in charge of implementing and working together with governments. There's important issues about, of course, on new pressing issues, and I believe our colleague is going to be talking about that, AI, digitalization. There's a lot of investment around that. And this is an issue not only for governments. There's an issue for implementation of those investments from government. Certainly is needed. We have to partner. But we have to focalize. We have to listen on where these investments are needed. It's not just pushing the agenda without effective implementation. And this is where the private sector plays a very, very important role. And this is absolutely aligned with UN 2.0, absolutely. No, it is about innovation. It's about data, digital, foresight and behavioral science skills, preparedness for the future. How are we going to integrate these voices of the young people that we were listening at if we don't identify where skills are needed? How we are going to integrate these people into the world of work if we don't listen to the needs of employers, the private sector that's going to be creating those jobs and contributing to a just transition. I'll leave this message there for the exchange with my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morales. Yes, thank you. Now, I turn to our second panelist, Mr. José Luis Fernández. Mr. Fernández is an AI expert, senior lecturer at the Centre Universitaire d'Informatique at Genève, and head of the SDG Accelerator. Let's talk about the need for multi-stakeholder negotiations in artificial intelligence. So, do you think that private firms, governments, and researchers can collaborate in this regard?
Thank you. Good evening, and thanks a lot for inviting me to be here. It's a pleasure. So the answer is yes, and as we can see from the other panelists, we need to collaborate, and we have to collaborate. So there is a need of collaborating between private firm, government, and researcher. Especially AI company and researcher, they play a key role because they bring the knowledge about what is AI and what are the risks that need to be regulated. So they play a key role in the implementation of efficient and effective regulation. So researchers also play a key role in identification of the risk and identification of what is regulated, what needs to be regulated, and also in support the implementation of the regulation to company, providing tools, providing methods for them to better deal with the regulation. So I'm coming from the academia, and I wanted to highlight some research where we identify potential risk on the use of AI. So the first one, during the COVID-19, we demonstrate that social media could be used for monitoring the acceptance of policies like wearing masks in public places or social distances. So basically, we took millions of images from social media, and we demonstrate that we could see whether people were wearing masks or dealing with social distance in public places. So that is very important for the evaluation of policies, to understand if people are following them, if they are adopting them, but on the same way is creating a risk of misuse of the technology that we are developing. So we play a key role on identifying this rule and understanding what technology can be useful and not. So I have been working for the last 6 years also in the use of social media for disaster response, especially in providing information about damage just after disaster happened, like earthquake or floods. And one of the things we do is we extract from millions of images of photos that information that is relevant for emergency responder, and we geolocate them. So we are pointing out vulnerable people, and at the same time we are giving the geolocation of the social media information that go against the privacy of the most of social media of removing the geolocation. So while AI can be used for many interesting social impact, we need to take into account that the technology that we develop can be misused. And that is part of the regulation, to be aware about how that needs to be regulated. And I wanted to mention a very recent study that was conducted by a collaboration between Apple and MIT University, where they identify the gender bias and stereotypes in large language model. That means in product services like ChatGPT. So it's very important to identify that there is a risk of gender bias there, but they also provide benchmarks to be able to evaluate the technologies, to be able, if that technology are producing information that is biased in some way. So very important that AI should be not here perpetuating gender inequality, and that needs to be regulated. So as researchers, at the way we create new AI system or we create new application of AI, we are contributing also on identify what needs to be regulated.
So these are the kind of multi-stakeholders mechanism that would be appropriate?
Yes, so I'm coming from Citizen Cyber Lab. It's a partnership between the University of Geneva, CERN, and UNITA, when we look at new form of public participation in research and innovation. So we really believe on the role of openness, open science. When we are regulating AI, the main goal of the regulation is to protect fundamental rights of the citizens. So if we are protecting fundamental rights of the citizen, we should involve citizens in the decision that we are taking. They are the main beneficiary of what we are regulating. So when we talk about citizens, we should be inclusive, and we need to find the multi-stakeholder mechanism that ensure inclusivity and transparency, having into account woman, man, young and senior citizen. And here I'm going to connect with the previous panel, especially with the intervention of Paul and Lara, because I really believe that there is a room for new ways of multi-stakeholder mechanisms which are more inclusive and which connect better with citizens and society. And we have examples of research on new way of participation. We have the future for the Conference for the Future of Europe, that was one of the largest deliberation process in history. We have the technology and we have the connectivity to allow to do things together and to be able to deliberate together. So I think that the multi-stakeholder mechanism should go beyond consultation. Giving voice is good, but participating in the co-creation process is even better. So the dialogue, the communication should be bidirectional, and we should be taking decision together. So in Geneva, we have many multi-stakeholder mechanisms that have been implemented. I'm going to mention just a few of them that I considered relevant. We have the Geneva Trialogue, that is a conference coming in the next month, that brings together different actors to shape the future of education of the SDGs. We have the Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipator that put together different communities to anticipate science and technology advances and advancement, which has a positive impact in our society. And we have associations like Open Geneva, who have been bringing together different sectors in Geneva, addressing challenges, creating roundtable of discussion, and innovating in a way between multi-stakeholders in the form of hackathons of open innovation. So I wanted to give a final message here, that we see that AI systems are evolving at a speed we didn't anticipate. So if you ask me 5 years ago if ChatGPT would be implemented, probably I would have said no, maybe in 20 years. So even our prediction about how technology is going to evolve, they are becoming shorter than expected. So the evolution of the AI is bringing challenges and need of regulation, but it's also bringing opportunities to address societal challenges. So today, more than ever, it's key to do applied research in which we center the research in this challenge from society. So, and I think Geneva is a perfect place because of the connection with International Geneva and the creation of challenges together with them. So they could be a perfect accelerator of solution addressing SDGs.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez, for this very interesting expertise on AI. Now I give the floor to our young discussant of this third and last panel, Mrs. Natasha Pambu from Jimun. You have the floor.
Thank you. Okay, it works. Thank you very much to the organizers tonight, and thank you to Greycells for having us. I am very honored to be standing in front of all of you and to be sitting next to the very prestigious co-guest speakers we have tonight. So I'm Natasha. I am a master's student in global health, and as mentioned, I am also the president of Jimun. We're an association that aims to build bridges between student and international organizations in Geneva while promoting the United Nations principles. So this gives us young people and students the opportunity to meet and interact with multi-stakeholders in different spheres. So being in Geneva gives many opportunities to young people to experience closeness with agencies, organizations, civil society, and other multilateral organs that we would not have the chance to come any close to if it was not for living in Geneva and in Switzerland in general. So I think here I speak on behalf of all students and all young people if I say that it is really a privilege to live in Geneva. For young people here who come from different countries, I invite you to think about your home country and your peers, your young peers back home, and think about all the opportunities you have here and try to think about if they would have the same opportunity. Personally, the answer for me is no, and I think even New York could never. Thanks to Jimun's special status as an NGO registered at ECOSOC at the United Nations, we have been able to have links with the UN, and also for the last 2 years we have actually been organizing bid conferences with the ILO, which makes the panel today particularly relevant for me, especially because this year's conference we organized had a very interesting MUN committee about, it was an ILO committee, which was about AI and job protection, so it is even more relevant for me to be part in this panel. So this brings me to a few questions that I'd like to reflect on when thinking about ILO, AI, and how the evolution of multilateral system will be. What should be their role moving forward? Well, to me, the answer is quite simple. The role of AI, the role of multilateral discussions should be central, and it can't be, honestly, any other way. For example, think about AI. Whether we want it or not, it is taking place in almost every aspect of our lives. Younger generations are not going to know anything else but a world with AI. But what does it imply? To me, it implies that it has to be supervised and framed. The debate that we had during that MUN conference raised many of the views that young people have, and they were both complementary but also contradictory. Is AI a threat or a helpful future? I like to think that it's both, and the outcome will depend on how well multi-stakeholders were supervised and implemented. Like it was mentioned just now, some limits and challenges of the AI are present and they need to be addressed in order to have a good evolution. So ILO could be one of the perfect examples on how to do so. How do you protect future jobs from being threatened by AI? How do you ensure that we will still have an importance and a relevance? Well, only by taking part in multi-stakeholders conversation we can make sure to find a middle ground. Take the ILO. As mentioned by Mr. Tapiola, it consists of governments, employers, employees, all being in the same room and finding a middle ground to have the best income, and that works. Isn't it amazing? Here, I think I don't speak only for young people, but for everyone if I say that this seems to be the best way to keep moving forward. So, to answer another question, or really more to reflect about them, will this still be relevant in the next decade, or should it be addressed today? Well, I really believe that now, more than ever, is the time, and more than after, especially. We are in an era of change, and tackling those questions in 10, 20 years will probably be too late. The time for multi-stakeholders to have conversation is now. Probably this topic would evolve and still have some relevance in a few years, but if we don't address it now, later we'll be overtaken. So we young people are really living this change at full speed. It is here while we are studying, it is here while we are working, while we find our first job, so we grow with it. We are willing to participate and take part in multilateral conversation. Jimun is here tonight. Jimun will be there at the Geneva Health Forum. We'll be here at the Geneva Trialogue. Trust us, we are really willing to be here. And to add a bit of a positive mindset into all of this, I will add that we are not only ready, but we are also helpful into what it will take.
Thank you, Natasha. Mr. Tapiola, Mr. Morales, Mr. Tapiola, I saw you taking notes. Would you add a brief comment to what you've just heard from Natasha?
Well, I mean, I'd like to make two observations. One of them is this, what I would call a dialogue gap. I think we have at this moment a growing gap between those who can take decisions on the economy, on new technology and so on, and those who are affected by it. And we need to find the way to get back to dialogue. And this has been the problem ever since, I mean, whichever technology it is, ever since the Luddites started or wanted to break down textile machines in the early Industrial Revolution times. So you have a question of how do you use it, how do you best use it, and then you come to the question of dialogue. And this is then where you need, well, those who are directly involved, employers, business workers, civil society, different ways. Another thing that I'd like to mention in this connection is the question of the private sector in general. 5 years ago, I was working on a history of the ILO's workers group. And you cannot do that without looking at the history of the employers group also. And the employers as organizations did not quite exist at the time. The notion of dialogue or cooperation was not really there. But you had different models. You had conflict models where issues were solved by conflict and where they were solved by negotiations. In one of the histories of the IOE, the International Organization of Employers, its longtime president, Mr. Oxlade, characterized the problem for the employers in the beginning of the ILO's history, early 20s, by saying that for the employers, ILO was an unsolicited gift, maybe even a Trojan horse. What could it be used for? But then they found out that yes, but working together with the unions, you could actually temper the government's desire to over-regulate things. In a way, the logic of starting to negotiate came through the experience that employers were involved in the process. And there were different stages in history. For the employers at the time, communism was a real threat, private sector employers. So the question was how to cooperate, how to find another way of dealing with this. There has been a big change which generally has not been noted, not in my view enough, on the whole attitude towards the private sector and the employers in the whole, I'd say, credo of the ILO. It starts somewhere after the end of the Cold War, when the employers were asking quite reasonably, well, what's in this for us? I mean, you can see the workers' interest, but also having a look at the employers' interest. That is when different enterprise programs and outreach started developing. And in a way there was, I don't want to use the word social contract because I have some reservations on that, but there was a kind of contract, understanding, that on one hand you recognized the role of the private sector and the role of enterprises and private enterprises in employment and economic growth and so on. But the other side of this agreement was supposed to be that the employer's side would also recognize the workers' right to bargain collectively, to organize, and the right to find issues through negotiations. And my worry is that this agreement is not being very well followed through. The whole notion of sustainable enterprises which the ILO developed around 2005, 2006, it was based on the idea that you have the employer's rights, the enterprise rights, and the workers' rights.
Okay,
I think there's a problem there at this moment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Tapiola. Mr. Fernandez, would you add a very short comment to what are you discussing?
Yes. Yes, so very short and relate with dialogue and also the role of the model of the United Nations. Some months ago, we were organizing at the UN Data Zone, a satellite event here in Geneva. And in that event, I have the opportunity to collaborate and to meet one person coming from the UNFCCC. And this person was using AI to facilitate negotiation within the institution. What I found it fascinating. So they were solving challenges of aggregating data, of processing data, always supervised by humans, but with the help using AI for enhance the activities they were doing. I found some limitation in the sense that we didn't have one of the questions he was presenting, and one student said, but how do you prove that the negotiation is better after using this technique? We don't have a sandbox where we can test technologies. And I really believe that organizations like the Model of the United Nations could play a key role evaluating new technologies for improving negotiation, or new technology to do negotiation with more dialogue, more participative. So I really believe that there is an opportunity there for connecting with researchers and to use the Model of the United Nations for empowering decision-making about how the UN 2.0 could be.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fernandez, Mr. Tapiola, and Natasha. Thank you for this very interesting third panel.